Good morning, and thank you so much for the introduction. As we've already spoken, my name is Geoff Quattromani, and I have a role which is a very interesting role. It's called Digital Transformation Manager, and I'll talk a little bit about that. That's my day job. That's my 9 to 5. And then there's always the 5 p.m. to midnight and what you do with those hours. And during those hours, I also have a second life as a tech commentator. So effectively, I talk about technology, talk about products, whether it's new product announcements, product reviews, things like that. And you can see on the screen at the moment some of the publications that I've worked with, whether it's in radio, print, television, and even overseas as well. So Singapore, Malta, different countries where I've had the chance to talk technology. It's just something extra. It's a bit of a hobby, and we'll talk about why it's important to have a hobby like this as well. Now, taking a step back, obviously, I expect most people on the call don't know who I am. To tell you a little bit about my past, my family, or my parents, were born in Malta, which is a small little island in Europe, and they eventually moved to Australia. But this was what they sort of grew up with. This was that little building you see in the background was effectively my dad's home, and very different sort of way of life to what we have in Australia today. And this photo isn't actually an old photo, it's just the way things are still over there. So it's a very different place, and I'm extremely grateful for the fact that they came to Australia and had me, and obviously the opportunities that has meant in this amazing country that we live in. As was mentioned in my introduction, I was a fairly poor student. I had plenty of interests in learning, but not necessarily learning about what I was being spoken to about. Some subjects just didn't resonate with me. As a result, you get distracted. You start to do your own thing sometimes. And for the most part, I knew that I had a passion for technology. When it came to those classes, I was always paying attention, maybe still distracted because I was running down my own path of what I found interesting in technology. But I wasn't an A-grade student. I wasn't the kind of student that got those awards at the end of the year for topping the class. But one award I always used to manage to get, because I wanted to bring something home to keep my parents proud, was perfect attendance. I always went to school. I never skipped a day, always made it to school on time. And as a result, I could come home with a certificate. It wasn't for being the smartest, it was for actually being there. So at least that was something to bring home. Now, to talk about my career, and I think this is an important focus for where you're all at and where you're starting to think about in your future. As a poor student, didn't really have the opportunity to go to university straight after school, nor was it really something that I was gravitating towards immediately either. Given I'd gone through all that schooling already, still went to year 12, I was kind of done with learning. I really wanted to get my hands dirty. As Tanzeen was mentioning in the previous presentation, personally, I learn by touching, I learn by doing. And for me, through my technology career, I've learned the most when I've had the chance to get my hands dirty and be involved. And my first job outside of schools was actually working for schools. So as soon as I graduated, I ended up applying for a traineeship with the Catholic Education Office, which run, a bunch of high schools and primary schools. And I was an IT support trainee. So I found myself back in a school, actually fixing the computers and the systems and things like that they have. It was an amazing couple of years, and I learned a lot, and eventually moved into consultancy, similar to what WiseTech does, in that I would actually visit different businesses, different homes, and fix computers, set up networks, install servers, whatever the case may be. And that was a really exciting time, because every day was different. Every job that I would go to was different, and you absolutely learned a lot along the way as well. So again, getting my hands dirty, actually touching things, not knowing what to expect every day was something that I absolutely loved. And I think, as we'll go through this presentation, and obviously the topic of this is around change, something that I thrive in and absolutely really enjoy is a changing environment. And while change can make a lot of people nervous, I think if you don't know what you don't know, why not try? And that's something that I'm excited about. So getting back to my career, you'll see, went into IT support, more an in-house company, and that was very exciting as well. But I found that different companies that I worked for would always have their own changes. And in this scenario, the company actually went bust, and they had the banks come in and close us down. And I found myself really needing a job very quickly. So change can happen a number of ways. Sometimes it's external, sometimes it's right in front of you, and sometimes it's a change that you need to make yourself as you go through your career. So at different points in my career ladder that I'm looking at here, there's been some changes that I've had control of and some that I haven't. But it's the pivot and how you handle those changes that have really been what's allowed me to take that next step, rather than just holding back and maybe being fearful. I've then moved into healthcare, and for anybody who looks at some of the biggest industries in Australia or even globally, healthcare is growing rapidly. And Johnson & Johnson, one of the largest companies in the world, I ended up working for them, and you'll see those 4-5 roles that I have had. They're all at Johnson & Johnson. Those ones in red are all at J&J. And what's been really interesting there is that given that it is such a large company, I've had the ability to change so many different times because it's such a big company that I can do that. I didn't have to leave the company to make those changes. So some of them have been promotions, some have been reorganization changes, but some of them have also been aspirational. Now, if I look at the beginning of my career and look at where I am now, the titles that I have or have had in the last 3 years, they didn't exist when I left year 12. So one of the important things to recognize here is that the roles that you're hearing about today, the roles that you're seeing on seek.com and others, aren't necessarily going to be there by the time you graduate. And there'll be hundreds of others of new roles that we still don't even know what they are, will be existing in a few years' time as well. So I think this is an important part to focus on. We can always talk about, I want to be a developer, I want to be a programmer, whatever it is. But what will that look like by the time you graduate? What will that look like by the time you leave university? These are things that are exciting to me, and I don't know where my career will end. If somebody asked me where I see myself in 10 years, I couldn't give you an answer. The main reason for that being, I don't know what roles will exist in 10 years' time. I don't know where the focus will be. Will we all be working with robots? Will I just be talking to a smart speaker? We're yet to find out. Now, speaking of smart speakers, in my day-to-day life, I have the opportunity to work with all different types of technology. And I think the ones that I'm highlighting here, many would be familiar with: smart speakers, virtual reality, Apple Watches. Now, while you're in healthcare, and many would think, well, healthcare is not really a tech company because they work with baby powder or shampoos and Band-Aids and things like that. But the reality is that inside those companies and even their external facing elements, we get to leverage technology to use our business and to drive our business. Smart speakers was an amazing project. We brought these into the business well before they were even on sale in Australia. I heard about the Amazon Alexa. I immediately ordered one from overseas, had it shipped to Australia, and we programmed it to start to tell us about sales results, to tell us about insights into our data that we wanted to know. Because sure, I could produce a report and you can read a report to tell you your sales figures, but wouldn't it be cool if our managing director could walk into his office and just ask the smart speaker for yesterday's sales or last month's sales? And we did that. And that was one of those ideas that we had, and we just ran with it to see what would happen. Same thing with virtual reality. We thought, wouldn't it be cool if that managing director, instead of talking to a speaker, maybe they could sit in their chair, put a headset on, and see the entire globe. And as they looked around each of the countries, the sales figures from each of those countries would start to appear. We did that. And then when it came to the Apple Watch, we noticed that he actually stopped wearing a Rolex to wear an Apple Watch. Pretty big decision to make in terms of watch choices there. But as a result of that, we said, well, wouldn't it be better if when he woke up and looked at his Apple Watch, that he could see his sales figures, that he could see his forecasts? And we did that as well. And these are things that are exciting to me because, again, it doesn't matter about the company you're working for. It's how you're applying that technology to suit your business. So don't think that if you work for a healthcare company or any other type of industry, that it will pull you away from tech. That's not necessarily the case. And especially that tech is now such a big part of our lives, you'll absolutely find a way to leverage any new trend, any new technology in an organization when you want to. Education is always a big part. And while I was not a star student, I have continued some education. I think it's extremely important to continue to learn, not just by getting hands-on, but getting some formal training as well. I mentioned that traineeship that I was part of. I got through my Certificate 3, Certificate 4 and Diploma in a quick 2-year period to try and ramp up some of my paper skills. I wanted to actually have something to put on my CV at the end of that traineeship. But also I eventually enrolled into university, because while I did not have the HSC scores to get me into university when I left year 12, it almost became a bit of a barrier in some ways when I wanted to get into management. So while getting into IT, getting into sort of the base levels was not that difficult without the degree, it got to conversations with CIOs about my career, and we started to realize it would really help if I had a degree in terms of business acumen. Being able to match technology with business strategy was something that I wanted to actually get hold of, and I learned more in university by being able to apply what I learned back into my role. So for me, that learning in conjunction with working at the same time actually helped me with that. And obviously now I'm in a new role of digital transformation. So I've been able to go to MIT in Boston virtually, and do a digital transformation course as well. So I think there are plenty of other small short courses along the way, but they've been the key ones that have helped me through my career. And I think short courses is something that even in year 9, people can start to take. If you've got some time, if you've finished watching what you needed on Netflix, if you've got time on the weekend, doing short courses at your own pace is something I absolutely recommend to people. I just finished one through Google. It was a digital marketing course. It was entirely free. Anybody can go and do it. Google's offering a whole bunch of different free courses. They're all short courses that you can do, self-paced with video content. And again, if you've got an interest in anything to do with technology, find a free short course. At the moment, they're all being run virtually, so it's easy to do. And I absolutely recommend it to people just to taste. If you have an interest in coding, you'll find those courses. Go and taste it, practice and learn, and see if it actually is a career you want to get into. Now, I did mention all these other things I do after hours, and it is a bit weird, but it is technology related. So for me, as I spoke about smart speakers, the Apple Watch and virtual reality, I wouldn't have known about all of those things if I had my head buried in the corporate world. By looking at the external world so much and being as close as I am to those companies, it's allowed me to bring them into the business and actually move our business forward in a way that we hadn't thought of before because of consumer-facing technology. Now, many years ago, about 10 or so years ago, I was a YouTube guy. I had my own YouTube channel. I would find what I could to review. I'd do a video about it, talk about it to camera. And that was fun. A couple of million views or something like that. It was an enjoyable thing, but boy, does it take a lot of time to produce video content. I started moving into radio. I started to do some blogging, so just writing about content and building relationships with brands along the way, because it's pretty expensive to buy an iPhone just to review it. So it was good to build brands with Apple, with Google and others to lend me product that I could actually review. Moving on to that, I started to become a tech contributor and had a larger website that I was primarily part of. That meant a lot of trips overseas for a product launch. Maybe there was a new speaker being launched in the US, so they would fly me business class to Boston to have a look at a speaker, talk about it, write about it, and come home. The same thing would happen every year going to Las Vegas in January for the Consumer Electronics Show. These are usually funded by those brands to help get you there and make sure you can see all the latest technology first and foremost. It's not just in small gadgets. The room that I'm in at the moment is full of product, which is embarrassing. That's why I use a virtual background. But it's even stemmed into cars, where Tesla will say, "We have the new Model S. Come and drive it and take it for a week." It's a lot of fun to do, but it also means work because I do have to write about it and talk about it. Now I tend to talk about technology on TV, whether it's Sunrise, the Today Show, and others. Radio stations across Australia, as well as in Singapore and Malta, but also just a lot more writing. I write for The Australian or news.com.au on a regular basis, and other magazines as well. But most importantly, I actually launched a podcast in the last few years, which allowed me to just speak into a microphone, talk about tech, no limitations with TV, radio slots or anything like that. And I found podcasting to be a nice avenue to also get my voice out further. And again, a lot of these things anybody could be doing. It's just something I wanted to do because I had a passion for it. But absolutely, if you're interested in going down a path like this, you could start today and you would pass me very quickly, I'm sure. Just some quick photos here from those opportunities that I have had, whether it's in TV, writing for newspapers and online, talking on the radio, and my podcast. An amazing passion to have, and just something that has helped my career more than I thought it would. And it's something that the companies that I've worked for have always supported as well. And I think that's an important thing to know here, is that companies do expect you to have hobbies. Companies do expect you to have other interests, and disclosing that to the companies that I've been working with has allowed me to make the time to commit to these things. If I do need to travel for an event, when we used to jump on airplanes, that's permitted and it's actually encouraged. When I do need to leave the office because I've got a TV crew coming to the house, that's okay. I can always work from home. And in fact, I've been working from home for far too long now, but it's absolutely something I encourage people to do. If you've got a passion for tech, chase it, absolutely chase it as soon as you can. Lastly on this one, I love to give back, and obviously this event is one opportunity to do that, but charity work and things like that is something I really recommend people doing. This is separate to technology, but this allows you to talk to more people, to see the way that everybody lives, to give back in some way. And I try to give back with my knowledge of technology or to help people with their careers and whatever the case may be. But there are so many ways to do it. And I absolutely think it's important, no matter how far you are in your career or in your life, everybody has something to offer. And I think even if it's just giving some time to help out a particular charity, I'd really recommend doing it. You'll feel better for it as well. Now, some messages to take home, because I do want you to sort of go leaving this thinking with something else. Be comfortable with the unknown. I mean, I couldn't stress this enough. Obviously, COVID has forced us to make a number of changes, but it's being comfortable with those changes and knowing that it's going to be okay. I think the most important thing, whether it's organizational changes that I've been through, so many different platforms have changed along the way in my career. Be comfortable with that. Know that you don't know what's happening tomorrow, and that's okay. Nobody does. We're all in the same boat together. We're all trying to figure it out. Some of us just look a bit more graceful as we go about things, and that's something really important to take home. We're all fortunate, and I really stress this, not just because of the photo that I showed of where my parents grew up, but this country that we live in is incredible. Not only do we have amazing healthcare, we have pretty good internet compared to other parts of the world. We have so many things at our fingertips that it's just amazing what opportunities we have. I mean, you being here today is something that many people in the world do not have access to. So I really think it's important to think about the cards that we've been dealt and just how lucky we are in this country with all the opportunities that we do have. Now, you can do it. And I think this is something I've had conversations with people about before, whereas whether it's people trying to get into technology, not thinking that they're good enough, not thinking that they can do it. Trust me, someone who looks just like you, who talks like you, who thinks like you has already done it. So trust me, you can do it too. And I think this is a really important thing to know. Don't look at me, don't look at anyone else presenting today and think, oh, they're just lucky because they were able to do that. No, trust me. You can absolutely have the career that you want and actually try the things that you're passionate about doing. You just have to keep going and keep trying. You can do it. But you're being replaced. And I think this is a fun one to talk about, because we have to realize that the world is evolving. Technology is rapidly changing. And as I said at the beginning, some roles that exist tomorrow didn't exist yesterday, and vice versa. Whether it's a robot that will serve our coffee because we don't need waiters anymore, or it's a robotic dog that will go into a burning household because it's too dangerous for firefighters, or it's the drive-through that actually I tested, where you drive through and you place your order, but there's not even a person on the end of the drive-through anymore. You're just talking to effectively artificial intelligence that's taking your order and putting that into the system. So there's a number of jobs that will disappear, but there's so many jobs that will absolutely reappear, and new ones that we've never absolutely ever heard of before. The one on the right-hand side is the Amazon Go shop. If you haven't heard about this, do check it out. Effectively, you walk into the store, you sign in with your Amazon account, you pick the items off the shelf that you want, and you walk out. You don't talk to a cashier. There's nothing like that. You just buy and go. It's that simple. It all works through your smartphone. And the Uber taxis that are going to fly very, very soon. I think it's coming out of Melbourne first, which will be very exciting. I'm hoping to be on one of those flights at some point. But, there is so much happening. Look at all the different jobs that could exist in working in any of those industries. Who's programming that drive-through speaker? Who's working behind the intelligence of that Amazon store? Who's programming those robots? There's so much opportunity coming. It's very, very exciting. So yes, some old jobs are being replaced, but that's okay. It's creating hundreds of new jobs. Start now. I could not stress this enough. School's great. I love school. I loved it socially, but there are short courses out there. There are passions that you've probably got. I was looking at some of the questions that were coming through in the previous session. If you've got a passion for coding, if you're interested in doing anything else already, and you're not finding that element being covered in your curriculum for school, go online. You'll find a free short course. You can read about it. You can watch YouTube videos about it. You can start to get your hands dirty now. Could you start an online blog and start to write about the things you're passionate about? Could you start to research things? Could you code and make an app and just try it? These are absolutely things you can start now, and most of it has a zero cost of entry, which means the only excuse is you and your time. Is Netflix or gaming as important? That's up to you. No judgment, but if you're absolutely keen on getting into a career in tech, having the advantage that when you leave year 12 or leave university of having more to talk about than just your education, it's absolutely helpful. So work experience, internships, all those kinds of things are fully encouraged. Now, most importantly, I would love to do some Q&A. Please keep in touch. If you do have questions that I don't answer here today, we're going to obviously get back to them as well. But at any point in time, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn or send me a tweet, whatever it is, whatever it works for the kids of today. Reach out and I'll always try and get back to everybody as well. But happy to take some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Geoff. We have a few questions here for you today. Where did you learn how to do those IT jobs, like installing servers? Like, was this something learned prior or like during the job?
Yeah, it's a good question. So obviously coming out of year 12, I had built my own computers at home. I had tinkered around with gadgets during school because we couldn't really afford to just buy a gaming rig if I wanted to play games. I had to build one and sort of scrounge around for parts. But once I started the traineeship, I learned so much from the people I worked with. You may get sent to a job and you have no idea how to do what they've asked you to do. There's always going to be different people in the team who could help you. And there's also the internet. Honestly, you could Google anything and you'll usually find the answer to it, as well as a how-to guide. So sometimes you do a little bit of faking it till you make it, but usually you'll find the answer online as well.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah. We have another question. Do you have any advice for a 15-year-old or someone who's a bit young looking into the software industry?
Awesome. If you want to get into software, whether it's software engineering, coding, programming, start as soon as you possibly can, whether it's doing short courses on those topics, finding exercises that you can follow. There's usually tutorials that will help guide you through some practice that you can be doing. Get started. If you want to build an app, work with Apple, work with Android to learn how to do those things, have a basic idea and just get started. I think getting your hands dirty is going to be the best way for you to learn. And no one's watching. You do it at home by yourself. It's totally fine.
That's really good advice. Yeah. What do you think was the most important things you learned in university, and how did you apply that to your job?
Yeah, for me, it really came down to gaining business skills. While I felt like I could talk about technology till the cows came home, when I actually was talking to C-level people in a corporation, actually being able to know what words to use with them, how to link what they were saying in terms of business strategy, business problems to technology solutions. The only way for me to do that was to understand where they were coming from. So having that business context, learning about all those business fundamentals through university certainly helped that a lot. But obviously learning on the job was just the perfect companion to everything I was learning formally as well.
Yeah. I have a question about your podcast. Where can you find your podcast and what type of topics do you talk about?
Okay, so the podcast is called Technology Uncorked. You'll find it anywhere, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, anywhere you like. You'll find it. We usually talk about consumer technology, and I sometimes have representatives from different companies as dedicated interviews where we just talk about what they do, whether it's Apple, Google, or somebody else, a little bit of a quiz, and it's very casual. So nothing too hard to understand, for sure.
That sounds pretty interesting for your podcast. Yeah. How did you adapt and learn how to do a number of different IT jobs?
So first of all, I think that the changes that we've gone through at Johnson & Johnson when there's been a restructure, I've been thrown into different fields that I may not have had a lot of knowledge around, especially when I moved into data and analytics. That was a scary topic for me to jump onto. But as a business analyst, if I go back to what I was saying before around pairing business needs with technology, it was understanding what the business was asking for and then working with my team to deliver that outcome. So I didn't have to actually know too much about how to do data and analytics or to code or anything like that. I had to at least understand the business. I mean, the reality is to everybody is that a lot of skills are offshore. We do have skills in this country as well, but if I can communicate with a team about what the business is looking for and articulate that in tech terms, effectively I'm a translator. And I can translate business to technology and vice versa. That means I could work in data analytics. I could work in a different area of the business and still be able to do that. So I think that's how I've been able to somehow still succeed in those diverse roles that I've had. But I think that's the core, is being able to understand both sides.
Yeah. Here's a COVID question. Do you enjoy working from home, or do you prefer the pre-COVID days?
I'll answer that in two ways. Absolutely love it, because as I sort of mentioned before, I had a Sunrise camera crew come here yesterday. I told them 11 a.m. They were here just after I finished a meeting. And then I jumped back into a work call at midday. So I love the flexibility of being able to have both my lives going at the same time, whether it's a radio call I've got today at 2 o'clock and then jumping back into another meeting, or it's having sessions like this, for example. I don't have to travel so much anymore, which means I can squeeze more into my day. So I miss the camaraderie. I miss seeing the people that I work with. I mean, this is great, but everyone can be honest. I'd much rather be with you all in person. I think that tells me a lot.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. Could you describe your role as a digital transformation manager, and what does your role involve, and how is information technology a part of your role?
Yeah, so this has been interesting. So this role didn't exist in Johnson & Johnson prior, but a 150-year-old company decided to take digital seriously. And that sounds funny in the year that we live in, but we recently built and launched our own localized website. So the Australian version of the J&J website. We've been always using a global version. We've had so much change come through in terms of this traditional company going digital, and whether that's going to work with digital marketing campaigns, which we did not do before, social media, which again we have not done for a long time. We are changing the way that J&J operates from being a very traditional conversational, here's your brochure type business, to fully digital. And we have to do that because of COVID, obviously, but we have to do that because it's also 2021.
Yeah. Here's another question. Do you know any good places to find free short courses online?
Yeah, so a massive shout out to the one I did with Google. I think the Google, it's called Google Knowledge Center or something like that. I'd say Google it. But effectively, it's a place where you can do heaps of different short courses around all these different topics, not just around Google specifically. I did a digital marketing course through them, entirely free, about 40 hours. Otherwise, most universities and even some of the TAFEs are running short courses. Some are free. A lot of them have opened up since COVID kicked in because of limitations to learning. So look around, you will be surprised what you find. Also, LinkedIn Learning is another place where you can go for other short courses.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think we have time for one final question.
Okay.
Did you always have a passion for technology? If so, how did it grow?
Yeah, great question. I absolutely always had a passion for it. It must have just been the first time I ever heard a dial-up modem make those glorious noises. And everyone on the call probably has no idea what I'm talking about, but computers used to beep a lot for no real reason, and modems used to churn and make a lot of noise. Getting on the internet was a chore. But I think the fact that there was this amazing thing that I could sit in front of, access other parts of the world, it was incredible. We had books we had to read, like physical books, like paper encyclopedias we had to read for assignments. So I think it was just how amazing technology was. And I'd be surprised, and I am surprised when people are against technology, because it is just such an amazing tool, depending on how we use it, of course. But it's just, how could you not?
Yeah, thank you, Geoff, for your insights and sharing your experience about IT careers.